A lot has happened over the last week and a half, people, because we had a lot of feed and pellets coming to King Island with the King Islander, together with the support from Need for Feed Australia. We have asked government, state government, what can they do? Can they do more? State government paid a little bit of money towards the transport. Question now is yeah, what can the federal government do more? And the person I'm going to ask that question to is Senator Anne Urquhart. Senator, welcome.
Thank you, Wade, and thanks for having me. It's not
Uh,
as good as being on King Island. I'm sitting in Canberra and I'd much prefer to be sitting on King Island, but it's lovely to talk to you.
well, I share that with you. I'm staying where I am, and I prefer that
Absolutely.
too. Now, the question, and we also asked the opposition last week, Senator, that can federal government do more to support? And the expectation, I think, is not that the federal government pays for hay or for pellets or whatever, but even thinking like support with a logistic program and the whole logistics around this whole campaign.
Yeah. So maybe, Wade, if I just go back and sort of spell out a little bit of the process initially, just to let people know and yourself know. So I think it was about the 29th of February, both the Minister and I met with Gavin Pearce, the member for Braddon, and we had departmental people there, and they took us through the sort of process of what happens with drought, etc., and sort of the responsibilities and what could be done. Since then, and I'll run through a little bit of that in a moment for you, but I've spoken to Graham Cockrell from the Need for Feed earlier today, and I thought it was really interesting for me to get an understanding of what they've done. I mean, I've seen all the great footage of the boat coming into the harbour and the beautiful sort of unloading of the feed, which was, I'm sure, very much appreciated by the farmers and people on King Island. And Graham has asked me to follow up on a few things around what sort of areas we might be able to help, and I've actually done that, and I've got an email to the Minister's office as we speak, and I think I've got a response back in my inbox, but I haven't had a chance to look at that at the moment. But the real important issue I think that people need to understand is that the way that we respond now or approach the response to droughts is guided by a long-standing national drought agreement, and that drought agreement goes back quite a few years. So in 2018, the Australian government and all states and territories signed the current national drought agreement. In that agreement, jurisdictions committed to a consistent and shared approach to work together on drought. The new National Drought Agreement was then approved by state ag ministers in December 2023. So it's actually the agreement that was struck back in 2018, and then they have a review every 4 years, as I understand, and that was informed by recommendations of the 2022 National Drought Agreement review. So the National Drought Agreement between the Australian state and territory governments will come into force on the 1st of July this year, and that will provide a framework for nationally coordinated and complementary drought policy and programs, but it will also describe the roles and responsibilities of all the jurisdictions. So that is a really long-term sort of agreement that's been in place since 2018 that is reviewed over a period of years. So under that long-standing agreement, it's the role of the Tasmanian government or any state government that signs up to it, obviously, to administer and coordinate drought policies and programs in their jurisdiction. So when you sort of talk about the federal government not recognising the word drought, it's part of the agreement where the role of the governments and state and territories is to administer and coordinate those drought responsibility and programs in their jurisdiction. Now, as part of the federal government's role, we have is a range of measures that are always available to allow farmers and rural communities to be better prepared for and manage through drought. Now, I've been to King Island, as you're probably aware, quite a few times since the drought has sort of been continuing. I've personally met with farmers over there on the island to talk about what are the opportunities that we as a federal government can provide to them. and what sort of things that we can do to try and help them. So I guess I wanted to run through a few of those issues about what the role of the federal government is. So we've been closely working with the Tasmanian government. Obviously, there was a little bit of time when the Tasmanian government was in caretaker mode, but for the rest of that time, the federal government's been working with the Tasmanian colleagues who are bringing together the Australian government and state resources, including the jointly funded local rural financial counselling service and the Australian government's drought resilience adoption and innovative hub, which is what we call the Drought Hub. That is funded under the Future Drought Fund to support those on King Island. And I think it was earlier in February, staff from the Drought Hub, along with state government officials, travelled to King Island to understand what the needs of the stakeholders and farmers were. The Drought Hub is then mobilising various future drought fund projects and resources to support King Island's agricultural sector. A workshop was held on the 22nd of February, focusing on livestock nutrition, on stock order requirements and decision-making support. And then a second event was held on the 14th of March, bringing together approximately 60 stakeholders, including Tasmanian State Government, industry groups, producer groups and farmers, to share information on managing business risks and to support decision-making. So we understand that the key issues for King Island farmers are receiving the fodder and other critical supplies and destocking via moving livestock off the island. So the fodder and the feed issue, as King Islanders will know, is further complicated by the strict biosecurity Tasmania arrangements that prevent introduction of new pests and weeds onto the island. So we've got to be very careful about the biosecurity and whatever comes onto the island from anywhere else. The federal department has supported Tasmanian officials by sharing details of shipping companies to support livestock movements off the island. And I understand there was a roundtable on the 15th of March between Tasmanian officials and farmers, shippers and processors to discuss prioritisation of processing King Island cattle and sheep. In addition to this targeted support, there are a range of ongoing support measures that are currently available to support King Island farmers. And these include drawing down on their farm management deposit holdings, accessing the Rural Financial Counselling Service for advice, for concessional loans by the Regional Investment Corporation, and when individuals have taken a significant financial hit, accessing the Farm Household Allowance. And there's also mental health and wellbeing support and other forms of community support that can be accessed when needed. So I thought it was important just to go through a number of things that have actually happened and what sort of services there are available. And that is in addition, I think, to, as I know you would know, what the Tasmanian government committed during the caretaker period and I think have subsequently provided some assistance for in terms of shipping. Now, one of the things that I spoke to Graham Cockrell about this morning was, in fact, whether or not there may be assistance through the federal government in terms of assistance with shipping costs, and I'm currently in the process of following that up and finding that out, whether it's through the Tasmania Fruit Equalisation Scheme or whether there might be any other areas that we can look at to try and get assistance.
Is there? I do fully understand where you're coming from, and I do understand now that. Well, put it this way: when it comes to drought, that's a state issue, not a federal government issue. Through the state government now and organisations, there are workshops have been held. How can you better farm? What can you do better? Even with the shipping, when it really comes to it, when you look at an organisation like Bass Island Line, they shipped a bit of cattle from the island and the government straight away jumps up and look what we've done. Excuse me, it needed a commercial entity, a shipping organisation to say, we ship your cattle almost for free, or cattle, your hay, almost for free to King Island. And it's the same with an organisation like Need for Feed. Without these organisations, farmers here would have been without hay and pellets. I cannot see how any form of government or organisation further would help. So it shows, and that's in a way, and sometimes I wonder if governments do understand all the volunteering that is done by organizations, by donations to make things happen?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question, and I think it's
a statement. It's a statement more than anything.
Yeah,
Sorry,
well,
it's not a question.
Yeah, no statement, but I think the statement is very prudent in terms that last week was National Volunteering Week, and I actually went to a volunteering lunch on Friday and thanked volunteers for the work that they do. And I think my comments when I spoke to that group was, without volunteers, really it would be very hard to make our organisations tick. So I get that. And I don't sort of want to get into the state versus federal, but there are responsibilities that each government has that are tied to commitments that governments sign, such as the drought arrangements that are in place. And sometimes when those negotiations are had and outcomes are reached and people sign on the dotted line, it is really hard to then try and move into one another's space. And that's why I think when I spoke to Graham today, he said to me, look, we've got extra bales, we've got other feed that we can get over. What other opportunities are there to try and get assistance to get that happen? And I said, well, I'll go away and have a look. I'm certainly happy to have a look.
Yeah. Do you want to open the inbox to have a look if the minister has given you the answer?
I actually can't at the moment because I'm on the screen that I'm talking to you on the screen that I would have opened my inbox. But I think I need to, But certainly, as I said, I sent an email to the minister this morning and I've got a response back, but I don't know whether that's an answer or whether it's we've received your email and I'm following it up. But I'm a bit like a terrier dog, Wade, when there's an issue. I generally continually follow up with ministers and I will try and go into every crevice to find any sort of help that I can. And if it's not really what I'm seeking, then I'll go somewhere else. So I think people can, be rest assured that I understand. I don't understand because I'm not a farmer. I don't live on King Island, but I have been there. I've listened to the stories and I certainly have an understanding of the pressure that the farmers are under in having to get feed on the island, which is, unheard of for a very, very long time, and it is quite devastating to see the state of the island. I've been coming to King Island for years, and to fly over and see, not that beautiful emerald sort of grass that you see when you usually fly in is quite devastating. So I am not a farmer. I'm not in their shoes, but I do have a lot of thought and I care about, the sort of things that are happening to them.
In a situation like this, what would you, and I know you're in the federal government, what would you suggest to the state government here in Tasmania? What would you say? Well, maybe have a look at this, or have a look at this or this, because as we stated, that it's 20% of the economy. What we're always talking proudly about when we listen to state politicians, and next year a lot less stock because of the destocking. So this is not the bringing the hay and the pellets to the island is one thing, but there's going to be a bigger impact. You know what I mean?
I think there's a number of issues, and I know I have met on many occasions with the shipping group on King Island, and I know that is a big issue. The state of the harbour is a big issue, having a safe harbour, having a harbour that can, have larger ships and the capacity building. I am looking at opportunities all the time to have those things looked at and see whether or not there's possibilities of getting improvements, because I think my general view is that because you choose to live on King Island, you should not have to be disadvantaged to a point of, because of where you live. And that's my view for everywhere. And whenever I'm in an opportunity to try and improve things, then I talk to people and try and get that done. It is difficult. We're in difficult times, obviously, but it doesn't mean to say that you don't try. And I think there's a lot of opportunities that people on King Island have come up with over the years that have been somewhat ignored by governments, both state and federal. And I think, there is times when you really have to stand up and say, well, hang on a minute, these people deserve to, be listened to because they are as worthy as anyone else.
But coming back to the question, what would you suggest to the government? Not only listening to them, but what if you were in say in state government right now? What would your steps be towards supporting here the farmers?
Yeah, well, I think the issue is, first of all, to try and look at getting that extra feed over. That's very important at the moment. I mean, no one can make grass grow. No one can make rain happen. So it is very difficult to try and sort of work that out. I know a lot of farmers have destocked. I know that, I think when I spoke to Graham today, he said there had been requests from 98 farmers, but also there are more farmers who haven't requested that. And I think I said to him, why is that? Why are there farmers who have got skinny cattle or, aren't reaching out? And his view was it was a number of areas, and he finds this not just on King Island, but anywhere that they go with the need for feed. It is about people's pride. It is about people not asking for help. It's about people not wanting to share their situation. It's about people thinking there is someone worse off than them. What I would say to the farmers is sing out, let us know, because we need a real big picture so that we can actually look at what is actually needed. I mean, I'm not in state government. I don't think it's up to me to tell the state government what they should and shouldn't do. It's my responsibility as being a member of the federal government to look at what we can do to, try and make sure that we help people as much as we can.
Well, as I said, I'm not asking you to say what governments or state governments should do, but what would you suggest? Can they provide more support? I know we have more dry areas in Tasmania where they have to look after too, but the biggest thing is here, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, bringing it across the Bass Strait in transport is a different world than driving from A to B with a semi load of hay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is you've sort of got to look at places like King Island with a different approach, I think, because you're right. I mean, a lot of Tasmania is in drought. I've seen just on the part of the northwest coast where I live, and I know just my little patch just behind Ulverston, like we haven't had rain. We did have a little bit the other night, and it was so lovely. I've forgotten what rain sounded like on the roof. But everything is so dry. But we do have the luxury, I suppose, of being able to, deliver stuff in a normal sort of manner, whereas King Island is obviously, isolated, and the only way you can get product in there is by boat. And so I think the issue is trying to help, ease the burden on getting stuff to the island is where we should be looking and trying to help as much as we can.
Well, I'm hoping, Senator, that you make Parliament and federal Parliament aware of all of that, and who knows, one day what might come out of it, and who knows, the email from the minister might be a positive one.
Well, I hope so, and certainly the minister that I've written to, like, I rattle the cage a fair bit. I'm pretty noisy up here, and I do get ministers sort of listening to me, but whether or not there's an avenue to assist, but I always say, well, don't come back to me without anything. Please come back with some options as to what we might be able to look at. And whether it is going to another minister and saying, well, what options do you have? I think, my motto is never give up, and I think that's what I'm going to try and do.
It's a good idea, and I think that's a good statement, Senator Anne Urquhart. We thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Wade.